Every powerful story of revenge begins with a moment that completely changes a person's life. It is usually not a small problem or a simple misunderstanding. Instead, it is a painful betrayal that shakes the heart and mind of the person who experiences it. Betrayal is one of the most painful emotions a human being can feel because it comes from someone we trust. When a stranger hurts us, it may cause anger or sadness. But when someone close to us breaks our trust, the pain goes much deeper. It feels personal. It feels unfair. It feels unforgettable. In this story, the main character lived a normal life before the betrayal happened. They trusted the people around them and believed that loyalty and honesty were the foundation of every relationship. Life felt safe and predictable. They had dreams, plans, and hopes for the future. The people in their life were not just companions. They were part of their emotional world. Whether it was a close friend, a romantic partner, or a family member, this person was someone the character believed would always stand by their side. But sometimes the people we trust the most have the power to hurt us the most. One day, the main character discovered something that completely shattered their world. It might have been a secret lie that was revealed, a hidden betrayal, cheating, manipulation, or a decision made behind their back. Whatever the exact situation was, the moment the truth came out, everything changed. At first, the character could not believe what had happened. Their mind refused to accept it. They kept thinking that maybe there was some misunderstanding or mistake. When people face betrayal, their first reaction is often disbelief. The brain tries to protect itself from emotional shock by refusing to accept the painful reality. The character replayed the situation again and again in their mind, hoping that somehow the truth would turn out to be different. But slowly the truth became impossible to ignore. The evidence was clear. The person they trusted had truly betrayed them. This realization brought a wave of emotions. The first emotion was shock. It felt like the ground beneath their feet had suddenly disappeared. Their heart felt heavy and their thoughts became confused. They could not focus on anything else because the betrayal kept repeating in their mind. After the shock came deep sadness. The character remembered all the moments they had shared with that person, the conversations, the laughter, the promises, and the trust they had built together. All those memories now felt different. What once seemed genuine now felt like a lie. This is one of the most painful parts of betrayal. It changes how we see the past. Moments that once brought happiness suddenly feel painful. The character began asking themselves many questions. Why did this happen? What did I do wrong? How could someone I trusted hurt me like this? These questions did not have easy answers. Sometimes betrayal happens because of selfishness, jealousy, greed, or weakness. Sometimes the person who betrays us never fully understands the damage they cause. But for the one who is betrayed, the pain is very real. During this time, the character felt emotionally broken. Their trust in people was damaged. They started to doubt not only the person who betrayed them, but also their own judgment. They wondered if they had been too naive or too trusting. For a while, the character felt powerless. It seemed like the betrayal had taken control of their life. Thoughts were filled with anger and sadness. They could not sleep peacefully. And their mind kept returning to the moment when they realized the truth. However, something important slowly began to happen inside the character. Pain has a strange power. At first, it weakens us, but over time, it can also make us stronger. As days passed, the character began to reflect on what had happened. They realized that although they could not change the betrayal, they could choose how to respond to it. This realization was the beginning of a transformation, instead of remaining trapped in sadness. The character started to feel a different kind of emotion determination. The betrayal that once made them feel weak slowly began to awaken a stronger side of their personality. They started thinking about their future. They asked themselves an important question. Will I allow this betrayal to destroy my life, or will I use it to become stronger. This question changed everything. The character understood that revenge does not always mean harming someone physically. True revenge can sometimes be something much deeper. It can mean proving that the betrayal did not break you. It can mean rising higher than the person who tried to bring you down. The pain they felt became a source of motivation. Instead of focusing only on the past, the character began thinking about how they could rebuild themselves. They decided they would not remain the same person who was once easily hurt. They would become stronger, wiser, and more determined. At this point in the story, the betrayal had already done its damage. The trust was broken and the relationship was destroyed. But the most important change was happening inside the character. The moment of betrayal had awakened a powerful desire for justice and self-respect. They started observing the world differently. They became more careful about whom they trusted. They also realized the importance of self-worth. Before the betrayal, they may have relied heavily on the opinions or approval of others. But now they began to understand that their value did not depend on anyone else's loyalty. The betrayal became a lesson, even though it was a painful one. Sometimes the people who hurt us unintentionally push us toward growth. The characters slowly began rebuilding their confidence and focusing on their personal goals. They wanted to prove not only to the person who betrayed them, but also to themselves that they were capable of overcoming any challenge. This stage of the story is very important because it shows the emotional turning point. The character moves from being a victim of betrayal to someone who is ready to take control of their life again. The seed of revenge was planted in this moment, a revenge driven only by anger, but a revenge driven by determination to rise stronger than before. The betrayal had changed everything. It destroyed the old version of the character, the one who trusted blindly and believed everyone had good intentions. But from the ruins of that painful moment, a new version of the character began to emerge stronger, more aware, and ready to shape their own destiny. In many great stories, the moment of betrayal becomes the beginning of an extraordinary journey. It forces the character to grow, to fight, and to prove their strength. Without this painful moment, the transformation would never happen, and that is why the moment of betrayal is so powerful. It is not only the beginning of revenge, it is the beginning of change. The character now understood one important truth. Their story would not end with betrayal. Instead, that painful moment would become the foundation of a future that would surprise everyone, including the person who betrayed them. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is not destruction. Sometimes the greatest revenge is becoming stronger than the pain that once tried to break you. After the painful moment of betrayal, most people expect an immediate reaction. Usually, when someone feels hurt or betrayed, they respond with anger, shouting, arguments, or emotional outbursts. This is a natural human reaction because pain often demands expression. However, in this story, the main character reacted very differently. Instead of reacting loudly or confronting the person who betrayed them, they chose silence. On the outside, they appeared calm and controlled, almost as if nothing had happened. This quiet behavior confused the people around them, because everyone expected a dramatic reaction. The person who caused the betrayal may have even expected anger, tears, or confrontation. But none of that happened. The character simply stayed quiet. This silence was not a sign of weakness. In fact, it was the beginning of something much deeper and more powerful. Inside their mind, the character was thinking carefully about everything that had happened. They were analyzing the situation, the actions of the people involved, and the consequences of reacting emotionally. They realized that acting in anger would only give satisfaction to the person who betrayed them. It would also make them lose control of the situation. Instead, they decided to remain calm and think strategically. At first, maintaining this silence was very difficult. The pain of betrayal was still fresh, and the emotions were strong. There were moments when the character felt the urge to speak out, to demand explanations, or to express their anger. Their heart was filled with questions and frustration. However, they understood something important. Reacting immediately would not solve anything. Emotional reactions often lead to mistakes, and mistakes can weaken a person's position. Choosing silence. The character gave themselves time to think clearly. The people around them started to notice this unusual calmness. Some thought the character was simply trying to avoid conflict. Others believed the character was too weak to confront the situation. A few people may have even assumed that the character had accepted the betrayal and decided to move on. But none of these assumptions were correct. What they did not realize was that the character was quietly planning their future inside their mind. A powerful decision had already been made. The character promised themselves that they would not remain a victim of betrayal. They would rise above the situation and prove their strength through actions rather than words. This promise became a source of motivation. Every time they remembered the betrayal, they reminded themselves of the decision they had made. This silent decision marked the beginning of a transformation. Instead of focusing on revenge driven by anger, the character began focusing on self-improvement and strategic thinking. They realized that the most powerful response to betrayal is not emotional chaos, but calm determination. By staying quiet, they gained the advantage of observation. Observation became one of their greatest tools. They began paying close attention to the behavior of the people around them. They noticed patterns, intentions, and hidden motives that they had never seen before. Sometimes when people believe someone is weak or unaware, they reveal more of their true nature. Because the character remained silent, others became careless in their behavior. They spoke freely, acted confidently, and assumed there would be no consequences. This gave the character valuable insight. They learned more about the personalities, weaknesses, and ambitions of those involved in the betrayal. Instead of reacting emotionally, they used this information to understand the situation more deeply. Knowledge became their strength. During this time, the character also began focusing on themselves. Betrayal can easily destroy a person's confidence, but the character refused to let that happen. They started rebuilding their inner strength. They spent time thinking about their goals, their future, and the kind of person they wanted to become. This process required patience. Change does not happen overnight, and the character understood that true transformation takes time. Each day, they worked quietly on improving themselves. They developed new skills, strengthened their mindset, and learned to control their emotions more effectively. The silence they maintained was not empty, was filled with purpose. Every day that passed made them stronger, wiser, and more focused. Slowly, the pain that once felt overwhelming began to transform into determination. One of the most powerful aspects of this silent decision was self-control. Controlling emotions is one of the most difficult challenges for any human being. Anger and sadness often push people to act without thinking. However, the character chose discipline instead of impulsiveness. They understood that true power often lies in patience. Patience allowed them to see opportunities that emotional reactions would have hidden. Instead of rushing toward revenge, they allowed time to reveal the best path forward. They knew that actions taken at the right moment can be far more powerful than actions taken in anger. As weeks and months passed, the character's mindset continued to evolve. The betrayal that once caused deep emotional pain slowly became a source of strength. Instead of seeing themselves as someone who had been defeated, they began to see themselves as someone who had been awakened. They realized that the betrayal had forced them to grow. It had shown them the reality of human nature and taught them valuable lessons about trust, loyalty, and personal strength. Although the experience was painful, it also gave them a new perspective on life. The silent decision they made after the betrayal became the foundation of their transformation. Without that moment of quiet reflection, they might have reacted impulsively and created more problems for themselves. Instead, they chose a path of patience and intelligence. This approach also created an element of mystery around them. The people, who had expected a dramatic reaction, could not understand their silence. Some began to feel uncomfortable because they did not know what the character was thinking. Silence can sometimes be more powerful than words because it creates uncertainty. The person who betrayed them may have initially felt confident or even victorious. Okay? They may have believed that their actions would have no consequences. However, the character knew that true revenge is not about quick reactions. It is about creating a future where the truth and strength become undeniable. As time passed, the character became more confident in their decision. They no longer felt the need to explain their silence or justify their actions. They trusted the process they had begun. Each step they took toward personal growth brought them closer to the future they envisioned. This quiet transformation also changed how they saw themselves. Before the betrayal, they may have relied heavily on trust and emotional connections. Now they understood the importance of inner strength and independence. They learned that true security does not come from trusting others blindly, but from believing in their own ability to overcome challenges. Eventually, the silent decision became the turning point that defined the entire story. It was the moment when the character chose discipline over chaos, patience over impulsiveness, and intelligence over anger. Many people believe revenge must be loud and dramatic. But the character understood something deeper, the most powerful. Revenge is often quiet. It happens slowly through growth, success, and transformation. It is not about hurting others, but about rising so high that the betrayal loses its power by choosing silence. The character gained time, clarity, and strength. They turned their pain into motivation and their betrayal into a lesson. It's quiet. Decisions set the stage for everything that would happen next in their journey. And that is why the silent decision is such an important part of the story. It represents the moment when a wounded person chooses to become stronger instead of remaining broken. It shows that true power does not always appear in loud reactions or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes the strongest decision a person can make is the decision to stay silent, observe carefully, and prepare patiently for the future. Because in that silence, transformation begins, one that will eventually surprise everyone who once believed the character was defeated. After experiencing betrayal and making the silent decision to remain calm, the character entered a new phase of their life. This phase was not about reacting to the past anymore. Instead, it was about transforming the pain they felt into something useful and powerful. At first, this idea was not easy to understand. Pain usually makes people feel weak, angry, or hopeless. When someone is hurt deeply, their mind often becomes trapped in negative thoughts. They keep remembering the betrayal again and again, asking why it happened and wishing things had been different. But the characters slowly realized that constantly thinking about the betrayal would only keep them stuck in the past. They began to understand an important truth about life. Pain can either destroy a person or transform them. The difference depends on how a person chooses to respond to that pain. Some people allow pain to control them, but others learn to use it as a source of strength. The character decided they would belong to the second group. Instead of allowing the betrayal to define their life, they would use it as motivation to become stronger than ever before. This decision marked the beginning of a powerful personal transformation. The character started focusing on improving themselves in every possible way. At first, the changes were small. They began by organizing their daily routine and setting simple goals. These goals were not about revenge directly. They were about growth, discipline, and self-respect. The character understood that real strength does not come from harming others. It comes from building yourself into someone who cannot easily be defeated. Each morning, the character reminded themselves of the promise they had made after the betrayal. They would not remain broken. They would become stronger. This daily reminder helped them stay focused, even when they felt tired or discouraged. Change requires effort, and effort requires determination. There were days when the pain returned and tried to weaken their motivation. On those days, the character used those emotions as fuel instead of obstacles. For example, whenever they remembered the betrayal, instead of becoming angry or sad, they asked themselves a different question. What can I do today to make myself better than I was yesterday? This simple question helped them shift their focus from the past to the future. Instead of wasting time thinking about what had already happened, they began concentrating on what they could control. One of the first areas they focused on was learning new skills. The character realized that knowledge and ability are powerful tools in life. The more skills a person has, the more opportunities they can create for themselves. So they began dedicating time each day to learning something valuable. It might have been improving their professional abilities, studying new subjects, developing creative talents, or strengthening their communication skills. Learning was not always easy. Sometimes they felt overwhelmed by how much they still needed to improve, but instead of giving up, they reminded themselves why they had started this journey. Every new skill they learned was another step away from the person they used to be, and another step toward the person they wanted to become. At the same time, the character also began working harder in their daily responsibilities. Whether it was their job, education, or personal projects, they started putting in more effort than ever before. The betrayal had awakened a deep sense of determination inside them. They wanted to prove not only to others, but also to themselves, that they were capable of achieving great things. This new work ethic gradually started producing results. Small achievements began to appear in their life. These achievements might not have been dramatic at first, but they were important. Success gave the character more confidence and motivation. Slowly, they started realizing that they were becoming stronger and more capable than they had ever been before. Confidence was another important part of their transformation. Betrayal often damages a person's self-esteem. It can make someone feel unworthy or foolish for trusting the wrong person. The character experienced these feelings as well in the beginning. However, as they continued improving themselves, or confidence started returning, they began recognizing their own value again. They realized that someone else's betrayal did not define their worth as a person. The actions of others are often a reflection of their own weaknesses, not the value of the person they hurt. Understanding this helped the character release some of the emotional burden they had been carrying. As time passed, the character also developed emotional strength. They became better at controlling their reactions and managing their thoughts. Instead of allowing negative emotions to control them, they learned to redirect those emotions toward productive activities. Anger became determination. Sadness became motivation. Frustration became discipline. This emotional transformation made them stronger not only mentally, but also socially. The character began interacting with people in a different way. They became more confident, more thoughtful, and more aware of human behavior. They learned to recognize who truly deserved their trust and who did not. Interestingly, the people who had once betrayed or underestimated them began noticing these changes. The character who once appeared hurt and vulnerable was now becoming confident, focused, and successful. Their progress started surprising those who expected them to remain broken. But the character did not focus on proving anything directly to those people. Their main focus remained personal growth. They understood that true success comes from building a meaningful and fulfilling life, not from seeking constant approval or recognition. One of the most powerful realizations the character had during this journey was that success itself can be a form of revenge. When someone expects you to fail, your success becomes a powerful response. When someone believes they have broken your spirit, your strength becomes the answer they never expected. The character did not need to argue, fight, or explain themselves. Their actions and achievements spoke louder than any words ever could. Every new success was proof that the betrayal had not destroyed them. In fact, it had done the opposite. It had pushed them toward growth they might never have discovered otherwise. This transformation did not happen overnight. It was the result of consistent effort over time. Day after day, the character continued improving themselves, learning from their experiences and staying committed to their goals. This steady progress gradually built a life that was stronger and more successful than the one they had before the betrayal. Eventually, the pain that once felt unbearable became something different. It became a reminder of how far they had come. Instead of feeling hurt when they remembered the betrayal, they began feeling proud of the strength they had developed because of it. The betrayal had once seemed like the end of their happiness, but now it looked more like the beginning of their transformation. This is why the idea of turning pain into power is so powerful. Pain itself is not the enemy. The real challenge is how we respond to it. When a person chooses growth instead of bitterness, they gain a kind of strength that cannot easily be taken away. The character's journey showed that revenge does not always need to be destructive or dramatic. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply becoming stronger, wiser, and more successful than anyone expected. By turning their pain into motivation, the character created a future that was brighter than their past. The betrayal that once threatened to destroy their life became the force that pushed them toward their greatest achievements. And in the end, that transformation became the most unforgettable response of all. As time continued to pass after the betrayal and the silent decision that followed, something remarkable began to happen in the life of the main character. At first, the changes were small and almost invisible. The character was simply focusing on improving themselves, learning new skills, working harder, and building their confidence again. They were not trying to prove anything to the world. Their goal was simply to rebuild their life and become stronger than they had been before. But over time, these small efforts began to create a powerful transformation that no one had expected in the beginning. Most people around the character still remembered them as the person who had been hurt and betrayed. Some people even believed that the character would never fully recover from that painful experience. Betrayal often leaves deep emotional scars, and many people assume that someone who has gone through such pain will remain weak or broken for a long time because of this. Very few people noticed the quiet progress the character was making every day. But the character did not let these assumptions affect them. They continued focusing on their personal growth. Day by day, they became more disciplined, more focused, and more determined. They woke up each morning with a clear purpose: to build a better version of themselves. Instead of wasting time thinking about the past, they concentrated on their future. One of the first noticeable changes was in their mindset. Before the betrayal, the character may have depended heavily on others for emotional support and validation. They trusted easily and believed that loyalty from others would always protect them. But the betrayal had taught them an important lesson about independence. They began to understand that true strength comes from within. This realization changed how they saw themselves and the world around them. They became more confident in their own decisions and abilities. Instead of constantly worrying about what others thought, they focused on what they truly wanted to achieve in life. This shift in mindset gave them a powerful sense of freedom. As their confidence grew, their behavior also began to change. The character carried themselves differently. They spoke with more clarity and certainty. Their body language showed strength and self-respect. These changes were subtle at first, but people around them slowly started noticing that something was different. Another important part of the transformation was their independence. The character learned to rely on their own abilities rather than depending too much on others. They made their own plans, pursued their own goals, and created their own opportunities. This independence made them stronger and more resilient. At the same time, their hard work began producing visible results. The skills they had been developing started opening new doors for them. Their efforts in work, education, or personal projects began attracting recognition. People started appreciating their dedication and determination. Success rarely happens overnight, but consistent effort eventually creates noticeable progress. The character began achieving goals that once seemed difficult or impossible. These Achievements boosted their confidence even further. With every success, they became more certain that their transformation was real. Gradually, the character's reputation began to change. The same people who once saw them as weak or vulnerable now started seeing them as capable and impressive. Their story of growth began attracting attention and respect. People admired their discipline and determination. The most surprising reactions, however, came from the people who had once betrayed them. At some point, those individuals began hearing about the character's success and transformation. Perhaps they saw it directly, or maybe they heard about it from others. Either way, they were shocked. The person they once believed they had hurt or defeated was now stronger and more successful than ever before. This realization created a powerful emotional reaction. Some of them felt surprised, others felt regret, and a few might even have felt envy. They could not understand how someone who had experienced such a painful betrayal could rise so high. What they failed to realize was that the betrayal itself had played a role in creating this transformation. Pain has a strange ability to awaken hidden strength inside a person. When someone experiences deep hurt, they often discover parts of themselves they never knew existed. In the character's case, the betrayal had pushed them to grow, learn, and become stronger. The transformation was not only visible in their achievements, it was also visible in their emotional maturity. The character had developed emotional control and resilience. Situations that once might have caused stress or insecurity no longer affected them in the same way. They had learned how to manage their emotions and remain calm even during difficult moments. This emotional strength made them more stable and confident in their relationships and decisions. They were no longer easily influenced by negativity or manipulation. Another important part of the transformation was mental growth. The character had spent a lot of time reflecting on their experiences and learning from them. This reflection helped them develop wisdom and self-awareness. They understood human behavior better than before. They could recognize dishonesty, manipulation, and hidden intentions more easily. This awareness allowed them to protect themselves from future betrayal. Despite all these changes, the character did not become bitter or cruel. Instead, they became wiser and more balanced. They learned to set healthy boundaries while still maintaining kindness and respect toward others. This balance between strength and humility made their transformation even more impressive. People who interacted with the character could feel the difference. There was a quiet confidence in their personality that commanded respect without demanding attention. They did not need to boast about their achievements or prove their worth to anyone. Their presence and actions spoke for themselves. As time went on, the character's life became a powerful example of what personal growth can achieve. Many people began admiring their journey and asking how they had managed to transform their life so dramatically. The truth was simple but powerful. They had refused to remain a victim of their past, instead of allowing betrayal to define them. They had used it as motivation to grow stronger. They had chosen discipline over anger, patience over impulsiveness, and growth over bitterness. This decision changed everything. The transformation that followed was unexpected not only for others but also for the character themselves. At the beginning of their journey, they simply wanted to recover from the pain and rebuild their life. They never imagined how strong and successful they would eventually become. Looking back, the character realized that the betrayal had been a turning point in their life. It had forced them to grow in ways they might never have explored otherwise. Sometimes life's most painful experiences become the starting point for our greatest transformations. In the end, the character had become someone entirely new. They were no longer the person who once felt helpless and heartbroken. They had become confident, independent, and powerful. Their transformation was not only visible in their achievements or success, it was visible in their mindset, their emotional strength, and their ability to face life with courage and wisdom. The people who once doubted them could now see the truth clearly. The person they had underestimated, had rebuilt themselves into someone extraordinary, and that unexpected transformation became one of the most powerful parts of the entire story because it proved that even the deepest pain can become the foundation of incredible growth. After many months and perhaps even years of growth, hard work, and personal transformation, the main character finally reached a moment that felt like the closing chapter of a long emotional journey. This moment did not arrive suddenly or dramatically. Instead, it appeared naturally through the passage of time and life's unexpected encounters. One day, the character crossed paths again with the same people who had once betrayed them. These were the individuals who had caused the pain that once seemed impossible to overcome. In the past, even the thought of seeing them again might have created anger, sadness, or anxiety. But now something had changed. The character was no longer the same person they had been during the time of betrayal. When the meeting happened, the situation was very different from what anyone had imagined before. The people who had betrayed the character probably expected a certain kind of reaction. They might have believed that the character would still be angry or bitter. They might have expected arguments, accusations, or emotional confrontation. Many stories. This is the moment where a dramatic conflict happens. People imagine revenge as something loud and aggressive, filled with harsh words and emotional outbursts. But that is not what happened here. Instead of anger or hostility, the betrayers saw something unexpected. They saw a person who had completely changed. The character stood before them with calm confidence and quiet strength. Their presence alone showed that they had moved far beyond the painful moment of betrayal. This moment was powerful because it revealed the true results of the character's transformation. All the time they had spent working on themselves, improving their skills, building their confidence, and creating a better life had led to this point. The character no longer needed to prove anything through words or arguments. Their growth had already become visible. The people who once betrayed them could clearly see the difference. The person standing before them was no longer hurt, insecure, or broken. Instead, they appeared strong, successful, and self-assured. Their body language, their calm expression, and the way they carried themselves showed that they had built a life that was far greater than the one that had been damaged by betrayal. For the betrayers, this moment created a deep sense of realization. Sometimes, people do not fully understand the consequences of their actions until much later. At the time of the betrayal, they may have believed that their actions would not matter much. They might have assumed that the character would remain weak, disappear from their lives, or simply accept the pain quietly. But seeing the character again made them realize something important. They had underestimated the strength of the person they had betrayed. As they looked at the character, they could see that the betrayal had not destroyed them. In fact, it seemed to have made them stronger. The character's confidence and success were clear evidence of the journey they had taken since that painful moment. The most powerful part of this meeting was the silence. The character did not need to raise their voice or remind anyone of the past. They did not need to describe the pain they had experienced or explain the effort it took to rebuild their life. All of that was already visible through who they had become. Sometimes, the strongest message a person can send is not spoken through words but shown through actions and presence. The character simply stood there as the person they had become. Their life, their confidence, their peace of mind were proof that they had overcome the betrayal. For the betrayers, this moment may have created a mix of emotions. Some might have felt surprised, others might have felt regret. A few might have felt uncomfortable realizing that the person they once hurt had grown far beyond their expectations. They may have started remembering the past differently. In the past, they might have believed they had power over the character or that their actions had placed them in a stronger position. But now the situation looked very different. Now they could see that the character had built a life that was independent of them. The betrayal that once seemed like a victory for them had actually become the beginning of the character's transformation. This realization can be very powerful. When someone sees the person they once underestimated become stronger and more Successful? It forces them to reflect on their own actions. In that moment, the betrayers understood something important. They had lost someone valuable. They realized that the person they once betrayed had grown into someone admirable and strong. The trust and loyalty they had once received from the character were now gone forever. That loss was something they could not reverse. This realization often becomes the true form of revenge. The character did not need to harm anyone or create conflict. Their success and happiness spoke louder than any revenge plan ever could. Showed that the betrayal had failed to destroy them. Instead, it had helped them become stronger. Another important aspect of this moment was the character's inner peace. In the past, seeing the betrayers might have filled them with anger or resentment. But after their long journey of growth, those emotions had faded. The character had learned an important lesson. Holding on to anger only keeps a person connected to the past. True freedom comes from letting go and focusing on the future. Standing in front of the people who once hurt them, the character realized that they no longer needed revenge in the traditional sense. They had already achieved something greater. They had built a life that was stronger, happier, and more meaningful than the one they had before. That realization gave them a sense of closure. Closure is an important part of healing. It is the moment when a person fully understands that the past no longer controls their future. The character understood that the betrayal was now only a chapter in their life story, not the entire story. They had moved beyond it. As the meeting came to an end, the characters simply continued with their life. They did not stay in the past or attempt to reopen old wounds. Their journey had already taught them the value of growth, patience, and resilience. For the people who once betrayed them, however, the meeting left a lasting impression. They had witnessed the result of a transformation they never expected. The person they once believed they had defeated had returned stronger than ever. And that realization became more powerful than any argument or confrontation could ever be. This is why the moment of realization is such an important part of the story. It represents the point where the character's transformation becomes undeniable. It shows that true revenge does not always involve hurting others. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is living a successful, confident, and peaceful life in the end. The character had proven something important, not only to others, but also to themselves. They had proven that betrayal does not have the power to destroy someone who refuses to give up. Instead, can become the starting point for growth, strength, and a future that is far greater than anyone once imagined. At the end of this powerful journey, the character finally reached a point where they could look back at everything that had happened in their life and understand it from a completely different perspective. What once seemed like the most painful experience of their life had slowly transformed into something meaningful and powerful. The betrayal that once broke their trust and filled them with sadness had eventually become the starting point of their greatest personal growth. When the character first experienced the betrayal, they felt hurt, confused, and emotionally overwhelmed. At that time, it seemed impossible to imagine that something positive could ever come from such a painful moment. However, as time passed, and the character continued to work on themselves, they began to realize that the situation had changed them in ways they never expected. At the beginning of their journey, the character believed revenge might mean confronting the people who betrayed them, proving them wrong, or making them feel the same pain they once caused. Many people think of revenge in this way. They imagine dramatic arguments, emotional confrontations, or actions meant to hurt the other person. But as the character grew stronger and wiser, their understanding of revenge began to change. They started realizing that revenge does not always need to involve anger or destruction. In fact, the most powerful kind of revenge can be completely different from what people usually imagine. Instead of focusing on harming others, the character decided to focus on improving their own life. This decision was not easy in the beginning because pain often creates strong emotions like anger and frustration. But the character understood something very important. Spending too much time thinking about revenge could trap them in the past. It could prevent them from building the future they truly wanted. So they made a conscious decision to move forward and use their experience as motivation rather than allowing it. To control them, this decision became the foundation of everything that followed. Day by day, the character continued to improve themselves. They worked harder, learned new skills, and developed stronger emotional control. They slowly rebuilt their confidence and created new opportunities for their future. Each step they took brought them closer to the life they wanted to build. At first, the progress seemed small. There were moments when the character felt tired or uncertain about the path they had chosen. Sometimes they wondered if all the effort would truly make a difference. But every time doubt appeared, they reminded themselves of the promise they had made after the betrayal. They had promised that they would not allow that painful moment to define the rest of their life. This promise gave them strength to continue moving forward. As months passed and then years followed, the results of their efforts became clearer. The character began achieving goals that once seemed impossible. Their hard work started bringing success in different areas of their life. It might have been career success, personal achievements, improved relationships, or simply a deeper sense of happiness and stability. The most important change, however, happened inside the character. They became mentally stronger and emotionally wiser. They learned how to handle challenges without losing control of their emotions. They developed patience, discipline, and confidence. These qualities helped them face life with a completely new mindset. In the past, the character may have depended on the trust and approval of others for their happiness. But now they understood that true confidence comes from believing in yourself. They no longer needed validation from the people who once hurt them. Their self-respect had become stronger than any external opinion. This inner strength allowed them to live their life with freedom and purpose. As their life improved, the character also noticed something interesting. The people who once betrayed them no longer had any real power over their emotions or their future. In the past, those individuals had caused deep pain and influenced how the character felt about themselves. But now their influence had disappeared. The character had taken control of their own story. This realization brought a deep sense of peace. Instead of carrying anger or resentment, the character began to see the past as a lesson rather than a wound. They understood that the betrayal had forced them to grow in ways they might never have explored otherwise. Sometimes, life's most difficult experiences become the beginning of our greatest transformations. The character also realized that revenge, driven by anger, often creates more pain for everyone involved. But revenge driven by growth and success can change everything in a positive way. By focusing on building a better life, the character had turned a negative experience into a powerful source of motivation. Eventually, they reached a point where they could honestly say that the betrayal no longer defined them. It was simply one chapter in their story. What defined them now was the person they had become because of that experience. They had developed resilience, wisdom, and strength. They had learned to value themselves and to protect their peace of mind. Their life now looked very different from the one they had before the betrayal. They had created new goals, new opportunities, and new relationships based on respect and honesty. They had built a future that felt meaningful and fulfilling. When the character thought about the idea of revenge again, they realized something surprising. The greatest revenge was not about making someone suffer. The greatest revenge was proving that their life could become better, stronger, and happier despite what had happened. By refusing to remain broken, the character had achieved something powerful. They had shown that betrayal does not have the power to destroy someone who is willing to grow and change. Their success and happiness became the answer to everything that had once hurt them. People who knew the story of the character's past began to admire their journey. They saw someone who had faced a painful situation and transformed it into a source of strength. The character's story became an example of how resilience and determination can overcome even the most difficult experiences. But the most important victory was not the admiration of others. The most important victory was the character's own sense of self-respect and inner peace. They had proven to themselves that they were stronger than the pain they once felt. They had proven that their future could be brighter than their past, and they had proven that revenge does not always need to be destructive to be powerful. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply living a life that is successful, confident, and full of purpose. In the end, the betrayal that once seemed like the worst moment of the character's life had actually become the moment that changed everything. It pushed them to grow. It pushed them to discover their strength. And it pushed them to build a life that was greater than anything they had imagined before. That is why this story is called The Revenge That Changed Everything. Because the revenge was not about destroying others. It was about transforming oneself into someone stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. And that transformation changed everything. One of the most powerful and important lessons in this story is the strength of patience. After the painful betrayal, the character could have reacted quickly and emotionally. Many people do this when they feel hurt. When someone experiences betrayal, anger, and frustration often push them to act immediately. They may want to confront the person who hurt them, argue with them, or try to get revenge right away. These reactions are natural because emotional pain creates a strong desire to respond quickly. However, quick reactions are not always wise. Acting without thinking can often make a difficult situation even worse. The character in this story understood this important truth. Instead of reacting immediately, they chose a different path. They chose patience. This decision was not easy, especially in the beginning. The betrayal was still fresh in their mind, and the emotional pain was real. There were moments when they felt the urge to speak out, confront the people who had hurt them, or prove that they had been treated unfairly. But every time those feelings appeared, the character reminded themselves that patience could be more powerful than anger. Patience gave them something very valuable: time. Time allowed them to think clearly instead of reacting emotionally. When emotions are very strong, it becomes difficult for a person to make wise decisions. Anger can cloud judgment and lead to actions that someone might regret later. By choosing patience, the character gave themselves the opportunity to step back and look at the situation more calmly. This calm perspective helped them understand that revenge does not always need to happen immediately. In fact, the most meaningful change often takes time. True growth, real success, and personal transformation cannot happen overnight. They require effort, consistency, and patience. The character realized that if they truly wanted to build a better life, they needed to focus on long-term goals rather than short-term emotions. This realization changed the direction of their journey. Instead of focusing on what had happened in the past, the character began focusing on what they could create in the future. They understood that their time and energy were too valuable to waste on anger or arguments. Instead, they decided to invest their energy in personal growth. Every day they took small steps toward improving themselves. These steps might have seemed simple at first, but they were important. The character worked on building new skills, strengthening their confidence, and improving their mindset. Each small effort was like a brick being placed in the foundation of a stronger future. Patience played a major role in this process. Many people begin working toward improvement, but become discouraged when results do not appear immediately. They expect quick success and become frustrated when progress is slow. But the character had already learned that meaningful change takes time. Instead of expecting instant results, they accepted the process of gradual growth. This mindset helped them stay consistent. Even on days when they felt tired or uncertain, they continued moving forward. They understood that progress does not always appear dramatic or exciting. Sometimes progress is quiet and slow, but it is still powerful. Over time, the character's patience began to create visible results. The skills they had been developing started improving their opportunities. Their confidence grew stronger as they realized how much they had learned. Their discipline became a habit that helped them stay focused on their goals. At first, other people did not notice these changes. The progress was happening quietly, and the character was not trying to draw attention to it. In fact, many people around them may have assumed that nothing had changed. Some people even believed that the character would eventually give up or remain stuck in the pain of the past. But the character continued their journey patiently. Day after day, they kept working on themselves and building their future. They did not allow the doubts or expectations of others to distract them. Their focus remained on their own growth. Patience also helped them develop emotional strength. As time passed, the intense anger and sadness they once felt slowly began to fade. Instead of reacting to painful memories, they learned to observe their emotions calmly. They realized that emotional control is one of the greatest forms of personal power. This emotional maturity allowed them to make wiser decisions and maintain inner peace even when challenges appeared. Eventually, the character began seeing the rewards of their patience. The hard work they had invested in themselves started creating opportunities and success. Their dedication brought recognition and respect from others. People began noticing the discipline and determination that had shaped their journey. The transformation that once seemed impossible was now becoming visible. The most powerful part of this success was that it was not temporary. Quick success often fades quickly as well. But the success created through patience and consistent effort tends to be much stronger and more lasting. The character had built their achievements step by step, which made their foundation solid and stable. When people around them finally noticed the results of their journey, many were surprised. Some could not believe how much the character had changed. The person they once saw as hurt or vulnerable had now become confident, disciplined, and successful. But the character understood that this transformation was not magic or luck. It was the result of patience. Every day they had chosen growth instead of anger. Every day they had chosen discipline instead of impulsive reactions. And every day they had continued moving forward even when progress seemed slow. This long-term dedication eventually created a life that was stronger and more fulfilling than the one they had before the betrayal. Looking back on their journey, the character realized something very important. If they had reacted immediately with anger or revenge, they might have created more conflict and pain in their life. They might have wasted time and energy on arguments. That would not have improved their situation. But by choosing patience, they had created something much more meaningful. They had built a better version of themselves. Their patience had allowed them to transform pain into strength and disappointment into motivation. It had given them the opportunity to grow into someone wiser, stronger, and more resilient. This is why patience is often considered one of the most powerful qualities a person can develop. Patience allows people to see beyond temporary emotions and focus on long-term success. It helps them remain calm during difficult moments and continue working toward their goals even when progress is slow. In the character's story, patience was not just a personality trait. It was the foundation of their transformation. Without patience, their journey might have ended in anger or frustration. But with patience, it became a story of growth, resilience, and success. Eventually, the character understood that the greatest victories in life are rarely achieved quickly, are built slowly through consistent effort, discipline, and belief in the future. The character's patience proved something powerful. Sometimes the best response to betrayal is not immediate revenge, but steady progress toward a better life. And when that progress finally becomes visible, it sends a message stronger than any act of anger ever could. Because patience turns pain into power, And over time, it can transform even the most difficult experiences into the foundation of a stronger and brighter future. At the end of this long and emotional journey, the character reached a point in life where everything finally started to make sense. The betrayal that once felt like the most painful experience of their life was no longer controlling their thoughts or emotions. In the past, the memory of that betrayal had created sadness, anger, and confusion. It felt like a heavy weight that followed them everywhere. But now, after everything they had learned and achieved, that painful memory had lost its power. Instead of feeling trapped by the past, the character began to feel something new and powerful. Freedom, this moment, marked the beginning of a completely new chapter in their life. It was not just a small change or improvement. It was a deep transformation in the way they saw themselves and their future. The character finally realized that they were no longer the same person who had once been hurt and betrayed. They had grown stronger through their experiences. They had learned important lessons about life, relationships, and personal strength. The journey that once began with pain had slowly turned into a journey of growth and discovery. In the past, the character often thought about the betrayal and the people who caused it. Those memories were painful, and they sometimes made the character question their own worth. They wondered why someone they trusted had chosen to hurt them. These thoughts created emotional struggles that were difficult to overcome, but over time, as the character continued focusing on personal growth, their perspective began to change. Instead of constantly looking back at what had happened, the character started looking forward. They began focusing on the possibilities that existed in their future rather than the problems that existed in their past. This change in perspective was very important because it allowed them to move forward without carrying the heavy burden of anger or resentment.